Colin Klein has found his first offensive coordinator as head coach of Kansas State, and I think it's a home run hire.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Now part of the #1 sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Got a fun episode for you today, as we always do right here on Locked On Kansas State. Going to talk about the brand new offensive coordinator, Colin Klein, found his guy. And it's exciting, a creative piece. We're going to discuss him today. We're going to talk about why that isn't so important to probably one of the most important pieces on a Kansas State offense, and that's the running back room. I think this is a huge addition to them. I'm going to explain why, especially with the new additions to that said running back room. And then we're going to end today's show with a little bit of portal chatter. Got a little bit more things as we get closer and closer to the portal closing tomorrow. And of course, a nice little fun cherry on top with a former Kansas State player getting elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. All of that right here on Locked On Kansas State, bringing you Wildcat coverage like nobody else. Make sure you hit that subscribe button today and continue to build this community as we are doing a great job. 2026 can be a huge year for the channel. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. What if I told you that Kansas State just added the sharpest offensive mind you really had never fully appreciated yet, but this guy is one of the best when it comes to the offense? And no, I'm not talking about the offensive guru in Colin Klein, although he's definitely up there. What if I told you that a offensive guru in Colin Klein just added a coach who turned an Ivy League scoring leader into an FBS points factory? He developed NFL talent and yet knows the league's defenses inside out based on all his stops. Kansas State, I'm telling you that this is a wake-up call that Colin Klein hit a home run hire by taking Sean Gleeson to become his new offensive coordinator. I don't think he just filled the position. I don't think he punted on this one. No pun intended by any means. Because Colin Klein obviously is coming from the offensive coordinator ranks. I think he added a dude that might not be here very long because of his track record and because of, honestly, what he should have been 5 years ago. And we're going to discuss that in just a minute. I think he's on the fast track to becoming a head coach himself. I think he's going to help redefine the ceiling of this offense at Kansas State. Kansas State hires Sean Gleeson, offensive coordinator. I think it's more than just filling a title, as I mentioned. I think it's putting a proven offensive architect. I'm going to put architect in there in the Colin Klein's first command center, his first coaching staff. And again, I think this is a home run hire, and I think he's done a great job with the coaching staff, period. Because you could have easily just, I mean it, you could easily have just punted on this one, and nobody would have batted an eye. Because you would expect, you know what, Colin's going to call the plays. This is going to be a placeholder offensive coordinator, basically to help him do everyday tasks. If that would have happened, and you would have hit every single other staff right, especially on the defensive side, I don't think too many people would have batted an eye. But instead, you bring in Sean Gleeson, who has amazing track record everywhere he has gone. He brings nearly 2 decades of experience in the coaching ranks. Huge. Not only is Kansas State focusing on relationships, they're focusing on experience. They're not really going for, you know what, we'll take it as a project. We're gonna think about your potential. No, they're bringing in experience. Colin Klein's staff is all about experience. He's not wasting any time when it comes to making sure he's getting the right pieces in place for his coaching staff. And I think Sean Gleeson is a perfect example of that. He started off, he was the quarterback's coach at Missouri recently, but he started off at Princeton. He engineered one of the most explosive offenses in FCS history, might I add. averaged nearly 47 points per game, undefeated season in 2018, multiple Ivy League titles during that time. Then he was on to Oklahoma State in 2019, and his offense ranked great. Now, this is not the Oklahoma State that you know right now. This is the Oklahoma State of old. 2019 Oklahoma State was a very good football team. A very good football team. 32.5 points per game, nearly 450 yards per game when it comes to the Oklahoma State offense in 2019. He pushed the ground game. Remember Chuba Hubbard? Remember him? Oklahoma State running back. Almost 2,100 rushing yards. Breakout performance from a freshman quarterback in Spencer Sanders, where nobody even heard of him. That was Sean Gleeson helping him step up in that one. I talked to Cody Stovall when the hiring just happened, the host of Locked On Oklahoma State. I said, give me the pros and cons of Sean Gleeson. Why was he only at Oklahoma State for 1 year? And he talked about his pros. He didn't even give me hardly any cons. He said his pros were his creativity, especially in the backfield, could have been something special if Gundy, talking about Coach Mike Gundy, the former coach of Oklahoma State, gave him a chance. Still, Gleason unlocked something in Chuba Hubbard. And that was something he talked about, unlocking in Hubbard, almost rushing for 2,100 rushing yards in 2019. You know, I asked him what made maybe that think Gundy gave him a chance, and he said he speculates. This is speculation. This is not reporting. He said he thinks they got into it at some point between Gundy and Gleason. He thinks that's had something to do with maybe him interjecting too much in the offense, and Gleason just wanted to move on. The relationship didn't work, apparently, which is fine. Not every relationship works. But what I'm trying to say is he already has Big 12 experience, and he didn't leave the Big 12 because of performance issues. He left because maybe a philosophical misunderstanding with the head coach, with somebody who was there for a very long time, wanted it his way or the highway, which ultimately ended in his demise this past season with Mike Gundy getting fired in the middle of the season after Oklahoma State not winning a Big 12 game in 2 years. This was post Sean Gleeson, by the way. Sean Gleeson was in Oklahoma State in 2019. But overall, this is a guy that has proven it already at the Big 12 level. After Oklahoma State, he went to Rutgers. And at Rutgers, he oversaw one of the most dramatic offensive improvements. He boosted scoring from almost all the way up to like extra 2 scores per game. He added 13.5 points per game. And again, added other good players to his resume that have good NFL experience. Guy like Pacheco. We all know about him, Kansas City Chief fans. Pacheco was coached by Sean Gleeson at Rutgers. So what I really like about this piece is that this isn't a coordinator making its first splash. And again, I think you could have totally went down that route if you are Colin Klein. And nobody would have batted an eye because of the amount of experience and really the amount of responsibility that you're going to assume that Colin Klein's going to take on the offensive side. I think this changes the entire possibilities, the entire things moving forward for this Kansas State offense. Of course, quarterback coach, play designs, that's going to be fun. You basically have not only 2 offensive coordinators on your staff, but 2 quarterback coaches. So you're going to have multiple people working with Avery Johnson. You're going to have multiple people focusing and working on strategy. You're going to have multiple people with experience in Power 4 football play design. His track record with developing quarterbacks and tailoring schemes makes him a play design asset. It's not just an overseer, not just somebody who's filling the role for Colin Klein. The recruiting leverage, I mean, he's coached at multiple different levels in different conferences inside FBS and FCS. Colin Klein is focused on adding Texas in his recruiting trail. He's focused on the local recruiting trails. He's focused on St. Louis, Missouri. He's focused on the Kansas area. He's focused on Colorado with some of his staff hirings. He coached in Oklahoma. He coached in the Ivy Leagues. He coached in Rutgers. This adds a completely in Missouri, another FCC edition. You've seen all the portal additions coming in from the SEC. This adds a completely different type of recruiting leverage that you did not have. And this is the highest of high other than head coach when it comes to the offense, with him being added to as offensive coordinator. And of course, like I mentioned, he's Big 12 ready. He was just with the SEC in Missouri. He was an offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. When Oklahoma State was good, might I add you, I need you to remember this. When he was good, when they were good because of him in 2019. I think it's an absolute home run. Sean Gleeson being the new offensive coordinator for Kansas State. And not only is it because you're adding a quarterback coach, not only is it because you're adding an experienced offensive coordinator to a position that Colin Klein could have punted on, because again, we don't know who's going to call plays. And that has been asked already. Who's going to call plays? Is it Colin Klein? Is it Sean Gleeson? That is yet to be determined. But the fact that you have experience from a Big 12 former offensive coordinator, somebody who has experience in the Big 10 and SEC, coming to join Colin Klein in year one as offensive coordinator and his staff, when you're trying to rebuild this thing, trying to go from 6-6 to Big 12 contender right away, because you have to raise the floor. It's Avery Johnson's final year. You have to do it. There's no punting on this year and saying, you know what? 6-6 is just good enough in year one of Colin Klein. And it would feel different. Don't get me wrong. 6-6 in year one of Colin Klein would feel a lot different than final year 6-6 of Chris Kleiman. It would feel different, especially if you see momentum moving forward. But the potential, the floor has to be much higher. I'm talking 8-4, 9-3 at the very smallest, folks. And I think with a guy like Sean Gleeson, I think you do that. And not only are you getting the quarterback coach, you're getting the offensive coordinator, but you're getting a guy that can bring NFL-ready talent to one of the most important rooms that Kansas State, the history of Kansas State football, has always focused on. That's the running back room. We're going to talk about that next, why he brings so much potential to that room, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all, the energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever, but actually getting tickets, well, that's the part that used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time. It gives advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. I love being able to see my view from my seat before buying, so I knew exactly what I was getting. And one of my favorite things is the zone deals. They stood out. You pick a section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save even more. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen of the day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. If you want even more, an exclusive all-member Discord access or ad-free, this show ad-free, consider joining the Everydayers Club. Check out lockedonkansasstate.supercast.com or check out the show notes for more information. We're talking about Gleason being added as the offensive coordinator. Talked about he's a clear home run hire for Colin Klein, and I think he's a clear home run hire for one of the most important positions in Kansas State in recent memory. When we talk about some of the best players that Kansas State's ever produced in the history of this program, running back comes to mind without question. And I think you just added more firepower to that position group. Bringing in Gleason as the offensive coordinator. Obviously, you brought in a great running back coach in Corey Patterson as well. All of them have worked with NFL talent. And now what you have added in this transfer portal, obviously with Joe Jackson being your true running back one, but bringing in guys like Rodney Fields, who was a great freshman for Oklahoma State last year, rushed for 600 yards and a touchdown on 124 carries, was very successful in year one, averaging 5 yards per carry. And then you bring in a guy with college football playoff experience, someone who scored a touchdown just recently in the college football playoffs, and Jay Harris, the soon-to-be senior out of St. Louis, Missouri, the running back for the Ducks, only had 151 yards on 42 carries last year, but was buried on the depth chart. He comes in and is really, you're talking about a potential three-headed monster for Kansas State in the running back room between Jackson, Fields, and Harris. Sounds like a law firm. I'll take that.
if the law firm is exactly what we're looking for, justice and touchdowns and getting over 5 yards a carry, count me in. And when you talk about having Gleason as your offensive coordinator, you talk about having Patterson as the running back coach, who also has worked with NFL talent, Chase Brown being the biggest one that I think about when he was a running back coach at Illinois. We already talked about Gleason with his past experience with Pacheco, with his past experience in the past with Chuba Hubbard, unlocking Chuba Hubbard. In the second half of the season, we saw signs and flashes of what Joe Jackson can potentially be. He was sitting behind Dylan Edwards. We thought we'd get flashes from Dylan Edwards. That didn't happen. What we got in the second season was a guy in Joe Jackson to break the rushing record for Kansas State in a single game. And I don't think he's been completely unlocked. Corey Patterson and Sean Gleeson, I think, could do that. And when you're talking about raising that bar, when you're talking about getting to that next level, and you're talking about Colin Klein making a huge first step in year one, I think you're going to rely on that running game a lot. You're bringing in a ton of weapons for Avery Johnson. The wide receiver room looks really exciting. I think you might even add one more piece to it as well. There's reports that today, Brandon White, the wide receiver out of Hawaii, is visiting Kansas State. This was reported by On3Pete Nakos, that Brandon White will be revisiting Kansas State, the wide receiver from Hawaii. Now, this is a exciting piece, a very exciting piece in the wide receiver room, who would already be adding Jerron Tibbs, who committed back to Kansas State today as well, put out on social media. And, of course, Isaiah Williams from Texas A&M, following Colin Klein over, Josh Manning from Mizzou. Another exciting piece as well. If you bring in Brandon White, this is a guy that was featured on ESPN this past season in the You Got Mossed category for having an electric touchdown against Cal earlier in the season. This is a very exciting piece if you can add this one in. And dare I say, I think you're talking about having the best wide receiver room you've had in 3 years at least, if you add an extra piece like a deep threat target like Brandon White. It makes losing Jace Brown so much easier. And there's other current targets as well. You know, you already talked about Fields. You talked about Harris, Joe Jackson being in the mix. There's a talk that Javon Gordon from Tulane, the running back from Tulane, also still might be there. They still might add one more piece to the running back room. They've done great additions to the offensive line, something that was absolutely needed. The only positions they did not add on the offense this year was quarterback, which they didn't need, and tight end, which they didn't need. The most important things for that in the portal was keeping their players in those positions. Quarterback Avery Johnson, tight end Lincoln Cure. Guess what they did? Kept them both. And you add around them Joe Jackson, Jay Harris, Rodney Fields. If it turns out, if you're looking at it on paper and you're hoping it translates the right way on the field, going from paper to grass or paper to turf, depending on the stadium, you're talking about potentially having the best running back room in the Big 12 heading into year one of Colin Klein, year one of Sean Gleeson. And with the potential that Gleason has already proven in 2018, 2019, what Chuba Hubbard, why would you not want to come and play for Kansas State in the running back room? You're talking about records being broken in the running back room last year, and then you add potentially a better running back room with better coaches that focus on the running back room, with better recruiters that focus in the running back position. These are the small things that aren't really seen on the field when playing the football game, but these are the small things that are going to change the way that Kansas State builds their football team and makes them a competitor year in and year out, beginning in 2026. Not just starting, not just slowly rising, beginning right off the bat as a true competitor inside the Big 12 in 2026. Look at their 2026 schedule. They have Nicholls, Washington State, and Tulane as their non-conference games. All winnable. You have an FCS opponent, and you have two teams that have brand new coaches in Washington State and in Tulane. Then you play at Arizona State. Who knows what happens there? Sam Leavitt's gone. They're not the same team they were 2 years ago. Cincinnati, Brandon Sorsby's gone. He went to Texas Tech. You have Colorado, beatable game. Iowa State, brand new coach. You have Arizona and you have Houston. Those are probably your two toughest games of the season. Oklahoma State, brand new coach, brand new identity. I think they're finding themselves out of the Big 12 basement, but I still think that's a winnable game. The streak should continue against Kansas. And then you finish off, the schedule. We don't know the actual direction at TCU. That could be a tough one. But again, Josh Hoover, no longer there. We'll see if Sonny Dykes can continue what he did after winning a great bowl game against USC. That's probably your third toughest game. If I had to pick right now, Arizona and Houston, I think, could be battling towards the top of the Big 12 as well. But no Texas Tech, no BYU. You have an opportunity to excel, to be better than 6-6. I expect it looking at this schedule. And what the pieces you brought in, there's no reason to believe that won't happen. Let's continue to talk this conversation. A new piece on the defensive line. We just talked Wendell Gregory. We said it'd be awesome if you get one more piece on the opposite side of him. I think they found it. We'll talk about that. And then some great news about a Kansas State legend to wrap up this show. We'll do that right here on Locked On Kansas State. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State. Thanks for making Locked On Kansas State your number one listen, your first listen of the day. Really appreciate that. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, bringing you Wildcat coverage like nobody else, your team every day. Look, we talked on yesterday's episode how exciting I was about Wendell Gregory being added to the mix as your new star edge rusher for Kansas State. I think he has a ton of upside. I think he's a true X factor on the defensive side. Whether you say that, well, he was Oklahoma State, that didn't really help. He's going to be around a lot more talent this year, and I'm really excited to see what he's going to do. My biggest question was, who's going to be on the opposite side of him? Do they have enough on the edge to really add that? Because there were so many players leaving from eligibility from the transfer portal that you didn't know if he was going to have another strong piece on his other side of the edge. And you brought in a lot of big defensive linemen. You brought in some players that can be on the edge. And I think you finally added a piece that could truly be that next edge rusher. Elijah Hill from Kennesaw State commits on Wednesday, and I think this is a huge addition for Kansas State. He comes over from Kennesaw State. He entered the transfer portal with a do not contact tag, which is interesting that he immediately, a day later, committed to Kansas State. But this is a guy who has a ton of upside as well. You're talking in one season. This is a guy who has a ton of eligibility, left 3 years of eligibility. In 1 year, had 9 sacks and 11 tackles for a loss. To put that in perspective, Tobi Asunsami in 4 years had 8.5 sacks and 12.5 tackles for a loss. Elijah Hill did that in 1 year. Now he did that with Kennesaw State. He didn't do that in the Big 12, but that still shows you that he has a ton of upside. And I think that will translate over to the Big 12. According to Pro Football Focus last year, Hill had an 87 even pass grade. Pretty good. That would have been one of the best in Kansas State of all last season, might even been the best, and almost an 18% pressure rate this past season for the Owls. Those are very, very good numbers. He's a native of Arkansas. He was on first team All-Conference USA last year as a true freshman, 6'2", 230 pounds. He's now going to play for Buddy Wyatt at Kansas State, and Buddy Wyatt is no stranger to winning Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year for Kansas State. No other team in the conference has more over the last 10 years. Very exciting stuff. I think they found. Now, he's a little raw. I think he's, when it comes to size, 6'2", 230, might be just slightly a little smaller than what they want. But I think if you have a good strength and conditioning program over the offseason, plenty of time to do so. Work on a little bit extra technique, which, of course, he's already getting to the quarterback, but ensure that gets to the Big 12 level, which I think Buddy Wyatt has definitely the resume to get that happening. I think you're talking about potentially a amazing duo, a fantastic tandem, a terrific tandem, if you will, for the edge rushers for Kansas State. Love this. Love this pickup for Kansas State with Elijah Hill and Wendell Gregory being the two potential starting edge rushers for 2026. And you're talking again about upside. Talked about those 9 sacks from Elijah Hill. Well, what about Wendell Gregory? In his 2 years, he had 4 sacks, 12 tackles for a loss. That's just as good as what Chidi Obiizor did in 3 years. So obviously, Osusami and Obiizor go to Indiana in the portal. You're missing out on huge talent, don't get me wrong. But I think you did an excellent job replacing them. And then you also replace them with extra years of eligibility. You can develop them to become even better players than what maybe Osasami and Obiaiza were going to be. And a fun piece to wrap up this show today, Terence Newman has officially been selected to the College Football Hall of Fame for 2026 class. He's one of the nation's all-time greats at the collegiate level, and of course, a Kansas State former player, hometown Kansas kid, come from Salina, Kansas, multi-sport standout at Salina High School with football, track, basketball, you name it. Fantastic player for Kansas State, had a great career in the NFL, and he is now added into the Collegiate Hall of Fame. With Kansas State, he played from 98 to 2002, and he became one of the best decorated defenders in program history. He built himself up in the early years as a solid special teamer, and by his senior season in 2002, he became a consensus All-American, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, Jim Thorpe Award winner as the nation's top defensive back, and he's still the only Wildcat to win that award. And in his time, he was a two-time All-Big 12 selection team captain and MVP. And again, as I mentioned, a force on special teams over his career. Had 10 interceptions, 41 passes defended, 134 tackles, multiple big plays on special teams in his time at Kansas State, and helped Kansas State get to 4 consecutive bowl appearances, including that key bowl victory in national rankings during that tenure here. And of course, at the NFL level, he made it to the College Football Hall of Fame. So this is not really what comes into play, but he was drafted 5th overall in 2003 by the Dallas Cowboys. Highest Wildcat draft slot since Switzer in 1954. Played 15 seasons with the Cowboys, Bengals, and Vikings. 2-time Pro Bowler in 07 and 09. And in his time had 42 career interceptions. Very good production for a cornerback and longevity inside the NFL, especially in the early 2000s when all the rule changes were yet to really take place. So gets himself obviously already a Kansas State Athletics Hall of Fame, already in the K-State Ring of Honor, and now in the College Football Hall of Fame for 2026. A true Kansas kid finding himself in the College Football Hall of Fame. And this one's big. This one's huge for Kansas State. Really like that. There's a pretty good list of additions for the College Football Hall of Fame, but one Kansas State player on there, and something who, in my opinion, was long overdue anyways, Terence Newman being added to the mix. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Locked On Kansas State. Hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, bringing you a Locked On Kansas State coverage, Wildcat coverage, like nobody else every single day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.